Hi, I'm Dr. David Purvis. Here's a question that I think about quite a lot. It's this: why is self-empowerment so difficult? Now, if you watch my videos, you'll know that I tend to think of mental health problems as just being problems to solve, which means that we can then use our normal problem-solving strategies because, you solve problems all of the time. But mental health problems often have a different quality to them, and it seems to me that it's quite difficult sometimes, for some people certainly, to engage with the process of self-empowerment. So I'd like to offer some thoughts as to why that might be the case. The first one is this: I think that it's difficult to know what to do if you have a mental health problem. So for instance, if you struggle with depression, it's hard to know how to treat that as a problem, as a life problem, let's say, and therefore it's difficult to know what to do about it. And the reason it's difficult to know what to do about it is because mental health problems have the quality of sucking you into them, so that they envelop you, so that you lose your ability to be objective, and it feels as if that's really all that you've got to focus on. So for instance, if you're extremely anxious, it's really difficult to think, actually, hang on, I'm not really under any threat. Anxiety is a fantasy created by my brain. Now, in the cold light of day, and if I was to explain it to you, you'd go, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a fantasy created by my brain. I am not under any threat. But when you feel threatened, it's difficult to remember to be objective. And likewise, when you're depressed, it's difficult to remember to be objective, because depression has a quality of shaving away your ability to be self-aware, so that you're just left in that pit of distress. And if we could get some mileage on how to treat mental health problems as just problems, we don't necessarily know how to deal with them. So we don't necessarily know how we would apply some form of tool, etc., which is often where a therapist comes in, because therapists will not only define the problem for you, they will also tell you what you need to do about it, which is basically the prime purpose of therapy. Therapists teach you what to do so that you can overcome your mental health problem, let's say, okay? It's not that you can't do it yourself, it's just that you don't know what to do. And I think it's true to say that there is virtually no story of self-empowerment that is kind of meaningful for mental health problems. Now, I know that YouTube and Facebook are full of people who are telling you what they have done to overcome these problems. And that's, it's a path. But the general narrative in society is that mental health problems are increasing. Massive numbers of people have mental health problems. You basically have to take an antidepressant or an anxiolytic. You go to your doctor, you don't get help, you end up being chronically depressed or chronically anxious. So the general narrative in society is that mental health problems are a bit of a black box. We just simply don't know how to resolve it. So you have to either go to an antidepressant or you have to go to a therapist of some sort, and then they will tell you what to do. So I think that there's a lack of a story of empowerment. Now, the story of empowerment that I put out, and I do recognize that I'm one of these people on YouTube and Facebook, but the story of empowerment that I put out is that you can learn all the tools that you need to be in charge of your own mental health. It's a difficult story to swallow, though, if you haven't got a clue what's going on inside your mind, because you're just not used to paying attention to it, or it all seems just too complicated or just too tangled or too much of a mess. If you wanted to achieve anything really meaningful, and whether you do this explicitly or just matter of course implicitly, you would set a goal. Now, suppose you set a goal, for instance, to just increase your steps. So let's say you just do a baseline survey of how many steps you do, and you say, well, I do about 4,500 steps a day. Okay. So if you said, well, I'd like to increase my steps by 500 steps a day. Now, 500 steps is not very many steps. You can pace up and down your hallway a few times to get 500 steps. But it is a small, measurable goal, and you can do it. Now, if you did 500 more steps every week, in short order, you'd have 10,000 steps. And 10,000 steps is that number that gets trotted out as being, quite a lot of exercise. So you could do 10,000 steps. And if you wanted to lose a little bit of weight or to be a bit fitter, certainly 10,000 steps would be helpful. So that's a nice, small goal. But in mental health terms, what would be a nice, small goal that you could buy into, you could practice, and you could then, measure? And that's actually really difficult, isn't it, to think of one. What would be a nice small goal if you struggle with anxiety or if you struggle with depression? Well, In my opinion, I think nice small goals, for instance, are to stop worrying, or to reduce the level of worrying, to reduce your overall stress level. So if I said to you, for instance, how stressed are you right now? 0, not at all. 10 is as bad as it could be. You might say, well, I'm an 8. I'll say, well, okay, let's reduce it to a 6. Well, how do I reduce my stress level? Well, how would you reduce your stress level? Okay, I guess I'll do some relaxation, possibly, listen to some music. Yeah, okay. You'll get 2 points reduction in your stress level just by paying attention to your stress level and deciding not to be an 8, but deciding to be a 6. Just doing something ever so slightly different. Even a change in attitude will reduce your stress level. I think it's important that we have this ability to set small goals and measure our goals. Just measure it, because you can't say, and this wouldn't make any sense to you, right? I am fit now, therefore I never have to exercise. I have achieved my ideal weight, therefore I never have to think about weight ever again. It just wouldn't make any sense, would it? I have read a book, therefore I never need to read another book. Okay, well, it's just meaningless, right? I have achieved this small goal, therefore I need to ignore my mental health for the rest of my life. Doesn't make any sense. So we progressively create small goals and we work towards them. And I think finally, we have a real hard job in believing we're able to achieve mental wellness ourselves without the input of a therapist or a medication of some sort. And I think one of the reasons that we do that is because often the core mental program that we're running in mental health problems is I can't, I'm not good enough, I can't do it, it's all going to go wrong, I don't have enough strength, I don't have enough confidence. So typically, and very often, the kinds of things that we struggle with are caused by these negative core beliefs that we have, that we're just not able, can't do it. And therefore self-efficacy, or feeling that you can do something useful to create mental wellness for yourself, just sits in an opposition to that negative core belief we have. And I think, just as an extra sort of final point, I think that we tend to suffer in preference to being active and doing something useful. So we would end up being massively unfit and having a heart attack before we do some exercise, right? We don't tend to be very proactive when it comes to mental health. And I think that's a big mistake, because with a little bit of proactiveness, we can really short circuit the whole mental health problem. In fact, you can make it go away. But if you wait until it becomes an absolute catastrophe where you have to be hospitalized because it's so bad, then it's a much longer journey to return back to some form of normality and some form of happiness and calm and contentment. So I think self-empowerment can be difficult for a number of reasons. It doesn't make it impossible, right? Everything that I've said applies to every human problem. It's just the added element of self-empowerment with mental health problems is that it's just a little bit harder to see them and a little bit harder to grasp them, because they're not physical things, they're psychological things, and that means that they're well, in your brain or in your mind. I hope you find this interesting. I think it's in a way, it's one of the most important topics there is, because if you can empower yourself to feel good or to achieve something in your life, empower yourself to be promoted at work, or empower yourself to be independently, financially, successful, wealthy, empower yourself to be intellectually accomplished, empower yourself to finish a degree, anything is great. And when you empower yourself, you're in charge and you can own the journey and the outcome. And I think that's fabulous. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen.